A bombshell has exploded in the Middle East. China's role in brokering an agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran has sent shockwaves throughout the region.
Well, it's also fueling fears that America's influence is declining while China's is on the rise. And it's raising concerns about Israel's security and the future of the Abraham Accords. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
After more than a year of meetings and 4 days of negotiations in Beijing between Iran and Saudi Arabia, China said the three nations reached an agreement. The deal includes resumption of diplomatic relations, reopening their embassies within 2 months, and a commitment to respect each other's sovereignty, keeping out of their internal affairs. Many Middle East observers are concerned over China's role in brokering the deal.
The new and deeply concerning factor here is the Chinese role in all of this. To suddenly find, kind of as a surprise, that our new great power competitor, the primary threat to the American-led world order, China, was so central to this deal that involves not only our worst enemy in the Middle East, but bringing them together with one of our oldest Arab friends and allies and partners in the region, Saudi Arabia.
Jason Greenblatt, one of the architects of the Abraham Accords, says it reveals China's growing influence and America's waning power in the region, and should be a wake-up call to the Biden administration.
The United States essentially has ceded some important ground, an important area for U.S. stability and security, to China to some degree. That's not good for the United States. I think the United States ought to pay attention.
Hannah recently visited Saudi Arabia and met with its top leaders. He says Saudi is hedging its bets because its relationship with the U.S. is not as strong as it once was.
If the Saudis had their druthers, the relationship with the United States would be strong, secure. They'd have enormous trust and confidence in it. Unfortunately, that has all eroded drastically over the last 2 years. That was the message we heard when we were in Riyadh.
CBN News asked Greenblatt what this means for Israel.
I think Israel needs to take a very, very close watch at this. I think they need to look forward and figure out how do they protect Israel.
Despite this deal, Greenblatt remains bullish on the Abraham Accords and believes it's still possible Saudi Arabia could join.
And I think we can look to the UAE to understand a country that has recognized a way to be close with Israel, develop strong ties with Israel, do significant business, and have security cooperation with Israel, while at the same time being realistic and understanding that Iran is also part of the region, and they can have ties with Iran while at the same time as having ties with Israel.
With the agreement just days old, many questions still remain about its impact on the region, from the possibility of Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords to the war in Yemen. Gordon?
Well, Chris, how does this affect Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords? Is that now dead in the water, or do you still see hope here?
No, Gordon, I don't think it's dead in the water, and it doesn't eliminate the prospect that the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Israel could have the Saudis joining the Abraham Accords. You know, last Thursday, they actually said what they wanted to join the Accords, and what they want first, and most of all, they want the relationship between themselves and the U.S. Repaired. And they actually did that in a Wall Street Journal article last Thursday. And the UAE is an example of a Gulf nation that can actually sort of walk and chew gum. They can develop strong ties with Israel economically and militarily, and yet they still have diplomatic and trade relations with Iran for the last several months. So I think this agreement doesn't necessarily eliminate the Saudis from joining the Abraham Accords.
Well, what impact will this have in the Middle East, specifically the war in Yemen? You know, you look at it, and it kind of seems improbable. Saudi Arabia was attacked by Iranian drones, one of their refineries, and now they're coming to reestablish diplomatic relations. So how broad of an impact is this?
Well, in terms of the war in Yemen, Gordon, it's been going on for years, and it's right now been paused for about a year. Iran has said earlier, actually even today, that this agreement will bring about a political solution and settlement in Yemen. But however, that means the world is really going to be depending on the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps to keep those commitments. And will Iran cooperate by restraining the Houthis? As you mentioned, they've sent missiles to not only Saudi Arabia, but to the UAE as well. So will Iran be able to restrain their proxy there in Yemen remains to be seen.
All right. Well, how's it affecting the internal political climate inside Israel? It looked like there was hope for Saudi Arabia to normalize relationships with Israel, create a bloc against Iran. And is that a problem now for Israel?
Well, politically inside Israel right now, Gordon, is really white hot politically. There have been demonstrations for weeks about the judicial reform. Really one of the most contentious times in Israel's history that I can remember. When the announcement came out, there was condemnation by all of Netanyahu's opponents, Yair Lapid, Naftali Bennett, Benny Gantz. On the other hand, there's been no comment by the foreign ministry and no comment by Prime Minister Netanyahu. And there's a larger question here as well, Gordon. I think, does this preclude Israel from launching a military strike against Iran's nuclear facilities? I think the answer is no. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israel really feel that they will not be restrained by any agreement if they feel that the Iranian nuclear program constitute an existential threat to the Jewish state.
All right, Chris, well, thank you for your insight.